I wanted to get your thoughts on the other, what I call suppressed assets, which I consider to be gold and silver, as well as some of the other utility cryptocurrencies you mentioned. But what role do you consider gold and silver to be suppressed assets as well, and what role will they play?
Gold and silver have been manipulated for a long time. I think that's a pretty well-known fact. The question comes up, though, as to why. Why go through all this effort to artificially suppress the price of gold, for example? The only real logical explanation is that's being done to protect the dollar. That if gold became way more valuable, it makes the dollar look less valuable and big money moves out of dollars and into gold. So if that no longer became the primary goal because the US dollar was no longer the global reserve currency, and those assets were allowed to kind of have price discovery and kind of do their thing, and we see the BRICS nations start to tie their currencies to gold and silver, it points, and central banks around the world have been stockpiling gold. Why would they do that if there wasn't a compelling reason? They could be buying diamonds or real estate, or I don't know, all sorts of other things that have high value. They've been focused on gold. I just think there's a lot of points that point to currencies being reconnected to gold after a major collapse, when people don't have trust in governments, they don't have trust in fiat. One thing that people have had trust in for centuries is gold. You can see it, you can touch it. I know it's a pain to move around and it's scarier to store, but it is something that universally has been considered money forever. Silver too. So I think, I mean, that part of my bag is in silver and gold to split up some of my dependence on purely digital assets, but I'm pretty bullish that they will be a part of the next financial system.
Well, and to that point, to add onto that further, you mentioned earlier the BRICS would potentially be able to use that against the dollar, right? And I wanted to ask you this: what else do they have? I mean, they're in a war, a full-on military kinetic war at this point, right? With Russia specifically. We know that there's a cyber war that's already underway. We know that there's a commodity war underway as well. But my question would be, what else would they have to go out? I mean, they're gold and silver and or using other resources like oil, natural gas to back their currencies would be the only thing. I think it's unlikely to see anyone back their currency by natural resources, but essentially what they've done is they've backed their ruble right now by their natural resources because they're only accepting rubles or gold for their natural resources. But yeah, to that point there, what do you think about that? I mean, what else do they have besides going to asset-backed currencies? People call the dollar a strategic weapon of the United States and the West. What else? What other weapons would they have besides going back to gold or silver?
So if you look at fundamentally the idea that energy is really the most valuable resource on the planet, and that ultimately all money is a representation of energy in some capacity. I mean, even the US dollar, there's a lot of energy that goes to protecting US supply chains and routes. Like the military is essentially a representation of energy of some sort, right? So let's go back to what BRICS is doing is they're taking all different formats of energy, whether it's gold that uses energy to dig it up, or it's oil that uses energy to run stuff, or even food, which is energy for humans to eat. They're taking all these sort of assets that are forms of energy and saying, we're going to essentially use those as money, but it's a pain to pay you in a bushel of corn. So I'm going to come up with a currency that's easier for me to logistically use than trying to pay you in this. Now, Jim Rickards has brought up some good points about the challenges with using something like oil to back a currency specifically, is that there's all different kinds of oil, like there's grades of it. There isn't just one sort of classification, so it gets kind of complicated. So I think the BRICS plan for now is to have this reserve currency where they simply have a bag of assets that sits somewhere and they say, all right, all of our assets here are worth $1 billion. And so the BRICS bank will issue, they'll like mint tokens for BRICS countries based on the worth of this stash of assets that they have. The question I have, though, that I don't have an answer to about that is, let's say you're a BRICS country and you have $1 billion worth of stuff that you then get tokens minted to you. What if you use some of that stuff? Like, who's going to keep track to make sure you don't, drive around cars with that oil or eat the food that's used to create it? That's the advantage of gold, is that you don't really use the gold for anything other than storage of value, where oil gets used as a resource, as do commodities. So I don't have a great answer about how that would be managed after the sort of minting of the BRICS token, and how they would ensure that those assets still exist.
Right. Well, and that's where they could use blockchain once again, create that Internet of Things, where basically they're slapping a QR code on every ounce of gold, and it's all tracked, and whatever other commodities are being traded. I think, like you said, that's going to take a while though, but I see them stashing record amounts of gold right now, gold and silver. And historically, you only have to back your dollar by 40% is the traditional gold standard, right? So, and then we see Zimbabwe has already started to mint their new gold coins, right? So, what I wanted to ask you though is, how far do you think this BRICS alliance is going to go? Because many of us are well aware of BRICS, what they're working on, how China's way ahead as far as their CBDC and that whole program's going on. And I like to say that that's a model country for that agenda and how they want to use that. But then you have other countries like Russia here that is just a vast amount of resources, and now they're conducting trade deals, sitting across from the table and saying, we're only accepting ruble or gold. You're going to have to pay us in that. But going further than that, now there's all these rumors of Saudi Arabia joining and other nations. I heard Kim.com suggested that basically every country that has been on the other side of the United States using their dollar as a strategic weapon is going to go with the BRICS alliance, which would include a lot of countries, right? Because this was the world reserve currency. And so I've been making the case that so many of these other countries have to move faster because they're having currency collapses already. They're already having food riots, cash shortages. So they're having to roll out their new system faster. They're having to move faster. But specifically, how far do you think the BRICS alliance is going to go? How many countries is going to join? Do you think Saudi Arabia is actually going to? How far do you think that alliance goes?
I think Saudi Arabia will join. I don't think countries like Saudi Arabia put out press releases that they're considering it unless that's a done deal. You don't really joke around about this kind of thing when you're dealing with something that serious. I think Iran, Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey, China, obviously India. I mean, this represents a huge percentage of asset producers in the world. And if all of a sudden the global store only takes payment in this BRICS currency, it will force the hand of the West to comply. I don't think you need everybody to be in BRICS for BRICS to have a significant impact on the value of the dollar.
Right.
I also, as an American who is really passionate about small businesses and industry within the US, I think the dollar not being the global reserve currency is a good thing. It will revitalize US manufacturing a lot. I live in a very rural area in the South that was devastated financially when manufacturing left this region. And there aren't a lot of other types of jobs for people around here. They don't want to live in a city and go to work in like a corporate office. It's a very blue collar working class area. And I think if the dollar, fell in value and US products became more competitive overseas, it could be a great thing for the US.
Well, we wouldn't be able to just trade fiat paper for whatever commodities or resources we want or goods, So that's an interesting point.